Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Show Don't Tell. My name is Pan, and of course my mission is to help give you guys some tips on how to improve your video or film skills. So today's episode is going to be 5 cinematography tips on how you can improve your video skills. But before we get going, please do press the subscribe button, and if you do end up liking this video, then please do press that like button. Big shout out to Snax Emporium, who are my video clients, and they've allowed me to use some of the shots from the promo videos we created. Link below to try some of their amazing iced coffee. So heading into tip number 1 is your depth of field. Depth of field is very, very important. I would say videos can look quite cheap if you don't use depth of field in the way you should, or they can just look not as professional or not as great. They can look quite homemade. So if you want to improve your video skills, then you need to learn a bit about depth of field, and in fact, shallow depth of field. So in a nutshell, depth of field is basically how the depth of your shot, how much of it is in focus. So for example, if you see me and say there was a field behind me, if you could see a lot of the background in focus along with me, you have quite a deep depth of field there, right? So it's just the focus keeps going and going and you see everything. A lot of people think that the opposite, shallow depth of field, is better looking and more professional looking. And a lot of films pretty much have shallow depth of field a lot of the times, especially on shots that are quite close. Like I'm fairly close, I would say, about 2/5 of my body, half of my body in the shot right now, or even when it's close-ups, tighter shots, shallow depth of field is quite important because it just makes everything look better. And not just that, it separates your subject from the background, or vice versa. It could be your foreground is out of focus and your background is in focus. It basically creates a more three-dimensional image, right? So that's why shallow depth of field can be important. Now, how do you achieve shallow depth of field easier? Well, the first way to do it is by having lenses that can open where the iris can open a lot. So the lower the aperture, the f-stop as we say, so say you go anywhere from lower than f4.0 or f4, you can begin to have a really, really shallow image, okay? So I would say f2.8 and lower is where you really start to get really beautiful, shallow shots. However, there is also a little tip for you guys to know, especially the beginners out there, on how to achieve shallow depth without having to have lenses that open up lower than f4. So the way to achieve this is actually very simple. So say you're at f6 even, or f7, or f5.6, whatever it might be, it's not as low as f2.8. You can go back with your camera and zoom in. So when you zoom in, you create more shallow depth of field. So that is a sort of quick hack there, quick way in how you can create more out of focus backgrounds or shallow depth or whatever it might be. Just go back with the camera, zoom in, and you suddenly create. Why does that happen? Because the more you zoom into a shot, the closer distances get. It's just how a camera works. It's almost an illusion kind of thing, because distances obviously do not change, but because we're talking about optics of the lens, when you zoom in with the lens, you are effectively making distances be closer to what they are. So the next thing I am going to talk about is movement. Movement is important when it comes to video and cinema. I mean, the word cinema, it comes from the word kinesis, which is a Greek word, and it means movement. So video is all about movement, as opposed to photos, which are still, you're capturing a still moment, so that moment has to be perfect. But with video, we're continuously watching something, right? So we want the eyes to be quite busy. Things look more interesting when there's loads of movement, and that's why as well you get certain action films that are quite pacey with the edit, because you go from one shot to the other, to the other, to the other. It makes everything feel more action-packed and things like that. And that helps the movement. It's at least what you can do. So if your shot is static like mine is now, because I'm self-shooting myself, so it couldn't be any more than that, but it also doesn't need to be, I don't think, for YouTube tutorials. The least of what I mean by movement is your subject is moving in the shot, and you're capturing things that are moving. Say you're doing a shot of a place, a location is quite a wide shot, and it's pretty dead. It'll only look good if you're trying to say in the story somewhere's dead. But if you're trying to capture something interesting and it's a static shot, there's no movement in the shot, that to me will look quite boring. So movement at the least should be static on the tripod, but there's something moving in your image. What else could movement be? It could be that you use a slider. So your slider can help you move and create tracking type shots, so that can help you create movement. Or you could use a gimbal or a Steadicam, where you can follow a subject or be followed by a subject, or create sort of different kinds of circular movements around them, or whatever, to kind of create movement. Or you can use your tripod and pan left or right, or tilt up and down, whatever it might be. So all of those things can create movement. So I would say movement, very, very important. You don't have to do every shot is a moving one, obviously, because end of the day, your subjects a lot of the time will be moving. So that's interesting enough on a static, you know, but it all just depends on what kind of a video or film you're making and what your aesthetic is. Okay, so next bit is the composition. Composition is quite important. So how you set everything in your image, you know, a lot of videographers or photographers can be quite OCD, or at least if I can say that figuratively, just to mean they want the people or whatever objects or whatever is in the shot to be placed in a very, very specific place, so that maybe it's symmetrical, for example. So if you want to be symmetrical, your subject is straight in the middle, kind of like I am now, and things are placed in even ways and it looks quite nice. So that can be quite symmetrical. Stanley Kubrick is a great filmmaker who loved symmetry and loved things to be centered. But there are other schools of thought. For example, you can get your grid lines out, right? So the grid basically divides the image into 9 sections. Okay, so you've got your middle space and then you have the outer spaces. Now, a lot of people believe that it's very beautiful when people, for example, tend to be in the in the top left or top right of these grids. So if you see the intersection bits, if you place your subject there, that can look pretty nice. Or if you look at the top line, maybe the eyes of your subject, if they come across that line, then that can look very nice. You can mess around with the grid lines really and see what you believe is best. End of the day, you can create shots that you believe look nice, that others don't. It can be experimented, but you know, the paradigms and the conventions are there as to what looks nice. So I would say learn those first before you begin to think that, you know, you're creating shots that do look great. Learn the conventions first and then break the rules in your own way. The fourth thing is lighting. Lighting is very important. Now there's 2 ways obviously to have lighting. It can either be natural light, i.e. meaning you're working with either daylight, which is a lot of it is exteriors. So the light source is obviously the sun, and it can work on both sunny days and cloudy days. Even when it's raining, whatever it might be, there's always enough light during the day to film. And also natural light could be practical lights or artificial lights that are already in your house. You switch them on, blah, 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 because they're there. That can also be kind of seen as natural light, to be honest. Maybe not, but I think let's call it for this instant, because they're lights that are already there that were not bought for filming. So we'll say that's kind of natural lighting as well in some ways. What is not natural light though is, like me, for example, right now, I have video lights that I am creating this look with, right? So here is what they are. I have a key light over here, which is a very big light with a diffusion box on it, and it casts this nice diffused light over me. So this is my key light, as we call it, and a key light tends to be sort of about 45 degrees that way or that way, and higher up, looking down at you so that you don't see shadows anywhere. So that tends to be the key light, and then you can have secondary or third lights. Now I do have a kicker, as we call it, over here, so I can switch it off even. See, I've switched it off, you no longer see that, but if I switch it back on, that is my kicker light, and that creates a nice rim. That now is going into slightly more advanced lighting, where you're trying to make the image or the subject look a bit more three-dimensional. So lighting can be important for all that. There's different reasons why you'd use different light. One of the normal reasons being you don't have enough light and you just need to chuck more light in so that your camera takes in enough light. Other things can be to make it look better, or you're doing high budget films or promotional videos or commercials, and you know, you want to make the image look as beautiful and three-dimensional as you can. So it all depends. And then obviously there's your natural light, which is outside, and a lot of the time it's more about controlling the light when it comes to outdoors. Okay, so one thing I would say when you're shooting outdoor is when it's a sunny day, try not to be shooting directly, having your subject looking towards the sun or be directed towards the sun, because the sun is quite harsh. It will make them quite uncomfortable, or it just won't look very great. So you usually want to make it sort of come through the side, because that can look more three-dimensional in itself, or the sun is behind them and you're still getting enough light out of it. Cloudy days tend to, even though it's not sunny and you're thinking, oh, it's not a great day, cloudy days are actually really, really nice for lighting, because you can think of the clouds as almost this massive diffusion sheet that brings the sun's light down and spreads it really, really evenly and nicely. So actually, for photographers and filmmakers, a lot of the time, when it's a normal cloudy day and it's not raining, that can actually give you the best results or the nicest results. On to the final thing, which is camera shots and camera angles. In a nutshell, I would say there's about 4 main camera shots. So that is how wide your shot is, how much of your subject you can see. There's wide shot, medium shot, close up, and extreme close up. Now, wide shots, you can see a lot of your subject in the shot, or it can even be called long shots sometimes, although long shots tend to be a bit closer than a wide shot. Wide shots is about, you know, seeing where you are a lot of the time. So a lot of establishing shots will be wide shots. So you establish where you are. Medium shots is half of the body, and you a lot of these are used when two people are talking, or when someone's talking, you're kind of not too close to them, but close enough to sort of be a part of that conversation. And then you get close-up. Now, I think the close-up is probably one of the most important shots in film, because it's how you convey emotion, right? And that can be an important part of revealing stuff about your characters, how they feel at certain points, just knowing more about the story or their emotions, as opposed to, say, the theater, where you're sitting back and you're just wide of the whole stage at all times. So actors need to be quite physical and bigger with their performances. While on film, we say you want to be more subtle when you're acting, especially when the camera is quite close to you, because we can see emotions so much easier. So close up, very, very important. And then the extreme close up, you're just making things look quite extreme. And then the final things are camera angles. So there's sort of 4 for that as well that are quite important. You have your eye level, which things can be quite normal. So things feel, there's nothing special about that. It's just feeling pretty normal. And a lot of things can be eye level. A lot of people are a bit OCD with eye level as well. They just think it looks the best. And then you have lower angles looking up that can make your subject look quite dominant. So that's saying something now. So suddenly you're using visual language. Or you can do the opposite and have a high angle looking down at them, and that can make them feel the opposite, so weak or small as opposed to dominant. And then you get your Dutch shot, as we call it, or your it's a bendy shot basically, and that can make things look pretty strange, pretty weird. A lot of horror sci-fis can use Dutch shots. I would say one of the best examples is J.J. Abrams' Star Trek 2009. He uses Dutch shots absolutely amazingly to make you feel like you're either on a ship or in space. It just creates incredible atmosphere. So yeah, that's sort of camera shots and angles in a nutshell. And those are very important. So that's it for today's episode, guys. I truly hope you did enjoy that. Please do subscribe and press like if you do think it was worth watching and you want to see more as well in the future. My name is Pan. It was lovely giving you guys a bit of an insight on all of that, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.